Hey everybody, this is Ben Schneider back again for another episode of the Ben Schneider Show. My guest today is my friend from the Comm Arts Department, Matt Cole. So Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Ben. I appreciate it.
Yeah, how have you been?
Good. I've been well as one can be during quarantine. Um, Classes have been going well. It's just it can be tough because there's a lot of time, and sometimes it can be difficult to figure out what to do at that time. And then I'm living with three other people, so that definitely it can be testing and it can be a trial at times, but um, we're all kind of finally working our way into a schedule. So just gotta go in stride, and hopefully this all finishes up pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah, I'm seeing some encouraging numbers come out of New York the last couple of days. So I think maybe they're starting to flatten the curve a little bit. So hopefully it's over sooner rather than later. I don't know. I'm not buying all the doomsday people that are saying it's the end of the world. It's going to be 2 to 3 years before we get through this. But then
Oh
others are saying, you know, it'll just be a couple of months and then we'll all be back to normal. Like I feel like it's gonna be somewhere in between, but
yeah,
I
I
don't
I
know.
think so too. I know that Wuhan uh, they just kind of opened up back up again. So they didn't they still have precautionary measures as far as the quarantine goes, but they're open and people are traveling within that area and people are outside. So um,
Yeah, yeah. When people compare it to the Spanish flu, that last major pandemic on the scale that we've had, I guess. But hygiene was not where it is today. Back in 1918, life was different. We have better communication now. We know what's happening on the other side of the world much quicker because of
mm,
the technology we have. So I think all of that's going to play a role in maybe getting over this a little bit quicker than world history suggests that pandemics of the past have lasted. So I'm
I
encouraged by
agree.
that. Yeah, well, I guess just to start, Matt, I've really known you ever since I set foot on campus, because we were in the same Dr. Cliff Hersey in his last semester
Yes.
took both of us on. I think there were only three people that he took on because it was going to be his last year. We didn't want to overburden him, but we were two of them
Yep.
in terms of him being our advisor. So I've known you for a long time, but I just want to get to know how you found Gordon, what your story is. I know you're from the New England area, obviously. So you're pretty much a local. But what brought you here? What drew you to the communications department? And just go from there.
Okay. It's a pretty interesting story, actually, because my junior year, I'd been looking at Endicott, and my brother had been looking at Gordon. So I remember one day he had received a brochure from Gordon, and I just thought the way it looked I just thought it was so cool. And I was like, I want one of those brochures. So that's what initially caused me to get information from the school, was because of the brochures. As silly as it sounds, that's what it caught my eye, and I was like, wow. Um, I want to get one of those. How do I get one of those? And he's like, oh, you just send your email and stuff for more information. And I did so. So I got my brochure, which was great. And just from there, I spent a lot of time in prayer, or tried to. And I toured a couple schools. Endicott was one of them. I was looking at a couple schools out in the Midwest, in Minnesota at Bethel University, and then University of Wisconsin Superior in Superior, Wisconsin. Um, but I prayed and prayed, and when I arrived on the campus, I did one of the self tours that they were allowing students and families to take part in. It must have been, I think it was October or November when I did it, of 2016, and I walked into the Lane Student Center, and I walked up outside the student life offices, kind of where those like wooden tables are that look like tree stumps, and they have the big golden tree on the wall, and some stuff up in the skylights. And I felt that God right there had called me to attend the school, and I wasn't really sure for what, but I've kind of been able to see His plan unravel over the last 3 years, and not only just what He's designed for me to do while at Gordon, but what He wants me to do after Gordon. Um, so it's been very, very encouraging. So it started off as kind of a silly story with the brochure, but it's been a great experience. It really has. I've met a lot of wonderful people, um, and gotten to partake in a lot of different events and groups on campus and athletics. So it's been a journey, but it's been a good one.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is your brother at Endicott?
He is at Endicott.
So you were looking at Endicott and ended up at Gordon. He was looking at Gordon and he ends up at Endicott.
Exactly.
Yeah, how's he doing over there?
He's good. He's enjoying himself. They had an extra week at school before their spring break. Obviously they're not going back now either. But yeah, he's been enjoying it over there. He likes it. He's part of a Christian group on campus, and I mean, every time I see him or talk to him, he's always got some good stories. He stays out of trouble, keeps his nose clean, and I go over visit him occasionally. It's a good campus. A lot of, I think a lot of good people there, and good people in the administration. And they just built a new student building, so I got to go in there, walk around with them, and it's pretty incredible.
Do you ever feel a conflict of interest when you're at a Gordon sports game and uh, I mean, obviously Endicott's probably our biggest rival, but you have a conflict of interest there because you have a family member that goes to the school too. So, do you ever feel conflicted when you're watching a Gordon Endicott game?
No, I'm pretty on board with Gordon,
That's good.
and always make sure that I vocalize that, especially if my brother's at one of the games.
Yeah. So you come here and you join the comm arts department.
Mhm.
I remember first semester freshman year we were in the same visual storytelling class
Yes,
with
sir.
Scott Thurman. So what drew you to that department, and what do you want to do with studying communications?
Well, I think what really got me into communications was actually it was a recommendation from my parents because I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I came to college. I had uh, just been tossing around a couple ideas and stuff, but um, I was really just more focused on the experience. I was like, oh, I'll go in as just undeclared and then bounce around, see what happens. And my mother in college was an English major and a French minor, and my dad was a business administration major with a minor in education. Um, but neither of those things really appealed to me. Growing up, I had loved, obviously, watch sports all the time, and if I was ever had my little toys that I was playing with, like my little hockey figurines or soccer figurines or whatever they were, I'd always do a lot of like mock broadcasting. Um, and my parents were like, "Well, you like to talk a lot. Like, why don't you do communications?" And I was like, "No, no, that's just no, that's too general. Like, that doesn't make any sense." Um, but meeting with some of the faculty uh, back when I was coming into Gordon, and talking to them to see what they had available for options as far as what classes they were offering and how they went about their program. I was really drawn to the fact that there wasn't one set course that you could take per se. You could, but their goal was to get you to be involved in a wide array of classes involving communication, so different types of communication. Um, Obviously, I think my favorite came with film production and video production and all the kind of excitement that goes into that. But it's been effective to also get marketing sides of communication, interpersonal communication, and I feel honestly like it's been a very well balanced curriculum in the sense that it can kind of help me with whatever direction I go in.
Yeah, that's something I totally agree with. I tell people that I feel like if Gordon were a bigger school, we might have more sub majors kind of under the communications blanket. But it has been nice to get a little bit of experience in virtually everything. I came here looking at journalism, and I ended
Yes.
up taking an intro to production class. I'm doing marketing and PR right now, so there's all sorts of skills that I'm learning that if I'm working in somewhere in media and I know basic uh, video editing and production that I got out of that class. It's not something like I don't want to be a filmmaker,
Yes.
but it is something useful that I have in my toolbox now if I ever need to use it. So I totally echo that statement. I'm very thankful for the wide range of skills that I've taken from that. So you mentioned really enjoying production. Have you gone on to do anything else with that, like with clubs on campus here or other classes?
Interestingly enough, I've been blessed with the opportunity to lead men's ministry on campus, be one of the leaders. And with everything going on with the quarantine and the COVID-19, um, we were trying to figure out how do we continue our ministry while we're all in different parts of the country, and we can't get together and do our regular meetings. So actually, I've been able to use that skill set to um, start, and we're 2 episodes in. We're going to be doing our third episode next week of an IGTV series.
Welcome to the
So it's
sacred
nothing,
space of men's
incredibly
ministry.
crazy, but
Your
it's
city
been
has a much different
fun
setting
to
than you
use
usually
those
see us,
production
whether that's
skills.
on the
And
campus of Gordon
my
College
co-leader,
or
Anthony Miko,
specifically
he's a
in
very talented
Youngstown, which we moved
photographer and
into in our
just
new campus
videographer in
building.
the sense that he
We
can
just want to
see things that I can't see. So it's been incredible to have him because he puts everything together in the here and now when we're filming, and then he sends me the footage, the raw footage, and then I can kind of cut it up and clip it together and mix some stuff around and then stick on a little graphic at the end. Um, and it's been a blast. So I really I wouldn't have any knowledge of anything like that without the production skills that I learned. And I've done a YouTube channel just for fun.
So if you missed the beginning there, what John was saying is, well, we start with some heavy compound movements, and then we'll move from there to stop repetitions where we're kind of going slow. We really want to work on the eccentric part of the movement, really get that mind-muscle connection going.
Just involves like some workout videos and stuff, more or less, just to help me get better acquainted with Adobe Premiere. But that's been a blast too. I don't know, I find a lot of joy in just sitting down and taking something that's big and unedited and kind of can be all over the place sometimes, and confining it and cutting it down into something that's succinct and fluid, or as succinct and fluid as it can be.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up because I know you do a lot of great work with men's ministry. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started over there?
Okay. My freshman year, it was my second semester, and there was a man who was a junior at the time. His name was Jesse Cook. And when I had come into Gordon, I was originally focused on doing a comm major and then doing a youth ministry minor. And that was something that I had talked with actually Dr. Cliff about. And, so I was kind of set doing that. I didn't end up going through with the youth ministry minor, but in one of the classes I took, Foundations of Youth Ministry, this young man, Jesse Cook, was in the class. And he had approached me kind of it was the beginning of the second semester of freshman year. And he said, hey, like men's ministry is doing like a video game night. He goes, why don't you come by, just like meet some of the guys, see what it's like. And they were running it together with some people from Rec IM. So I went by and met some of the guys, and they were really, really good, and just kind of kept hanging around with Jesse, and trying to remember who else was involved at the time. Alex King, actually, who works in Lane now with all the food services and stuff. He was one of the leaders at the time. So I just got to kind of spend time with all of them, and at the very end of the semester, Jesse said, I'm going to be taking over as the leader of men's ministry next year. I'd like if you would lead a group. So I was like, okay. And he goes, I know it's a lot, but, and I'm kind of just throwing this at you at the end of the semester, you got finals and stuff. He goes, but you could, lead a group on anything. So we talked about some ideas for some groups, and he said, I'll give you time to make your decision, and let you pray on it, and you can get back to me whenever you can. I said, well, can I make a decision now? He said, sure. I said, I'm in. So kind of sealed the deal there. And I got to meet Joe Sherritt, who was the co-leader with Jesse sophomore year, so last year. And I was just leading a group, kind of being mentored by the two of them, learning what to do, what not to do, learning how kind of the ins and outs of the chapel office and how finances worked and budgets worked and all those wonderful details. But complicated and tricky details. And this year, Anthony and I have been blessed to have taken the reins from Jesse and Joe, and they've actually come to some meetings. We've had them come to some meetings, and we try to check in with them as often as possible. But yeah, that's kind of more or less how I got involved with it. It was an opportunity that was thrown in my path, and I felt moved to embark on it. And it's been an incredible blessing, and especially working with Lauren Becker in the chapel office, the head of discipleship. It's been really incredible to be poured into by her, and she does it in such a gentle way. Nothing ever feels forced. She's always there and just saying, what are some ideas? How can I help you? And she's been great too, because in one of our conversations, she goes, I can help you put stuff together. I can help you with the budget. She goes, but at the end of the day, I'm a woman and you're leading men's ministry. So I can't help you connect with men the way that other male leaders on campus can. So she's given us a plethora of different professors and faculty that could fill that role. And we've been building some ties with like Dr. Rowe and Bill Mooney McCoy and some of those guys. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, and you and Anthony hosted a Scout Radio podcast for a little bit, right?
We did. That would have been sophomore year last semester, or excuse me, last spring semester. And it was called The Right Way. And we would just look at stuff, and it kind of was all over the place. A lot of current affairs, news, politics, sports, religion. And I think that was a great way to kind of build a bond and almost build a way in which, because coming down the end, we ended up talking a lot about religion and biblical passages. And I think that was really helpful in our transition to leading men's ministry. If we could have conversations with each other one-on-one about these things, now we can bring that dialogue to a larger group when we host our, small groups or an event or whatever it is that we're doing.
So you're a big Boston sports fan. Correct me if I'm wrong. I see you got the Red Sox hat on right now. But hockey's your main passion, right?
Yes, sir.
So tell me how that got started.
Okay. This is a pretty interesting story. It goes back to initially with my grandfather. My grandfather had started actually a youth hockey program in Lynn, so in my hometown, and they were called the Lynn Jets. And so he had created that back in, it must have been the late 60s. So he had started that program. My dad had played hockey growing up. He played on that team. He went to the same high school that I went to. He played there for a bit. He went to Brewster Academy for his last 2 years of high school. Then he went to St. Anselm's, played hockey there, played some junior hockey, got in a really bad car wreck, wasn't allowed to play hockey anymore, but he could referee. So from the time when he was in the car accident, which he was 20, I believe, so 19 or 20, until 1998, he was reffing. And he started, at the bottom and worked his way up, worked his way into the collegiate ranks where he made a pretty good name for himself. He probably I think he reffed half a dozen national championships, a lot of regionals, bean pots, Hockey East championships. And there was, I can't recall what year, but there was an NHL referee lockout. So they had brought a lot of the college guys up. So he got to do 6 NHL games. And he had the Canadians, the Bruins, I believe the Whalers at the time, the Flyers, I believe, and I can't remember the final 2 teams. But he'd bounced around, done some NHL games, and realized the traveling was too much. But after he retired, he got into kind of working administratively, and he's currently the national coordinator for ice hockey officials for Division I, Division III men's ice hockey. So just growing up around him, watching hockey a lot because he had to for work, and almost that was that was so ingrained in his life, it became ingrained in our lives, and never in a forced way. My parents actually didn't want me to play hockey for the longest time. I wanted to start when I was like really young, maybe 4 or 5 or 6. And they said, nope, you can't play hockey until you learn how to skate. So I started doing skating lessons at like 7, which is pretty late, and didn't start getting into goaltending until I was about 10 was my first time. And yeah, it was funny. They would always say, no, I don't think you really want to play hockey. Like, let's try other sports. So, as a kid, you grow up, you try a bunch of different sports, you find out what you like. And hockey was my biggest passion. And that's kind of where that all stemmed from.
How serious of a fan do you consider yourself of the National Hockey League? I know you're a big college fan, but
That's a really good question. I would say as far as the NHL goes, I'm probably more of a casual fan. I've been to some Bruins games, which were great. It was back. My first Bruins game was probably back in 2007, 2008, I believe, when Milan Lucic was there and Tim Thomas was still playing, and so it was a great team to kind of grow up watching. And over the years, it's they've been up and down, and they've finally kind of gained some traction, and they have a great head coach now. They got a lot of young guys, a lot of speed, which is the game I enjoy watching. Speed and finesse and youth. So as far as being really in depth with the NHL, I used to be able to follow it more closely in high school. I could follow that in college hockey and hockey over in Europe and minor league hockey, just everything. But as I've gotten older and gotten into college, time doesn't totally allow for that. So I keep up with it as often as I can, and I've actually been watching a lot of reruns on NESN, the local broadcasting sports broadcasting channel. They've been replaying stuff from the 2011 Stanley Cup playoffs and games from back in the 90s and the 80s. So I've probably actually watched more Bruins hockey during this quarantine than I have in the last 3 years of my life. So
I know Gordon used to have a club team. Did you ever get any opportunities to play with them and do stuff here?
Yes, I actually had. My freshman year, I tried out for the team, and I was blessed enough to be able to work my way up into the starting position as a goalie. And we had a lot of good guys on the team. And it was just tough because we had guys that really weren't as skilled or didn't have as much experience as most of the teams we were playing against. And we, for some reason, had been placed in Division II, which was really interesting. Considering the size of our school, I figured it would be a Division III school. So we were playing at a Division II school. So we were playing a lot of bigger schools with teams that had guys that had more experience, but they also had a wider variety of guys to choose from. But we played our games at Endicott, and we practiced at Pingree. So it was good. We had a short season because we weren't officially members of any conference yet. So I think we only played about 8 games. We started off great in the first 3 games and kind of slipped moving forward. But we got to play at Bright Arena at Harvard, which was an incredible experience to get to play there. And there were some good opportunities, especially getting to see. I got to know a lot of people through hockey in my freshman year, a lot of upperclassmen, and that was an experience I wouldn't trade for anything. It's unfortunate that the team is discontinued now, but I think that it's been good for me personally because it's led me down a lot of other paths and a lot of other kind of areas of exploration, and I can still play beer league or pick up whenever there's games, and there's tons in the area. And I'm actually playing at Endicott again, obviously not right now, but playing in a men's league over there. So as far as the Endicott rink, it's kind of been my main source of ice time for the last 3 years.
So all Boston sports, right? Across the board?
Yes.
So it's been a good 20 years or so for Patriots fans. What do you think of the whole Tom Brady exit?
Oh boy. I think I'm honest. I'm a little disappointed in how Tom Brady had gone about it, and I think Terry Bradshaw really summed it up well when he said, "I don't understand why Tom Brady feels like he needs to continue to play, or why he would go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers." He said, "It just has to be ego." And I've always really respected Tom Brady and his level of play. I haven't been as big a fan as most people in the area have been. I do think he was a great quarterback. I do. And we were lucky to have him for 20 years. But I think as much as Patriots fans, we all wanted to block it out. We knew that his time here was coming to an end, and we knew that there was, some infighting within the team, because you got Tom Brady, you got Robert Kraft, you got Bill Belichick. So you got these three kind of really big name, almost like celebrities, really, and they're all involved in the same organization. That's almost that's just kind of like putting explosives down, lighting the match, and expecting nothing to happen. So,
Yeah, but I know this is just a conspiracy theory that I've heard. I'm sure there's not a lot of merit to it. But there's a theory that you remember the Garoppolo trade.
yes,
And all the Patriots got for him was a second rounder, which you're thinking, this guy came in for Brady when he was suspended his 4 games and went 3-1, and he's looked good, young quarterback on the rise. Shouldn't you be able to maybe get more than just a second round pick for him? And the theory is that because Belichick is, he's 100% football mind. He doesn't care who you are or the name on the jersey or anything. He's just going to do whatever it takes to win.
yes,
So the thought is that perhaps Belichick actually wanted to trade Brady, and Kraft stepped in and said, "You can't do that." So to get back at Kraft, Belichick basically gave Garoppolo away.
oh wow,
Again, I don't know how much truth there is to that. But because I'm an Eagles fan, so
yeah,
I enjoy no longer having to deal with how many rings do you have jokes. Although 5 is still greater than 1, so my parents, Cowboys fans, they still give me grief over that. But I go back, and if you watch the NFL films of the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, when the Eagles beat the Patriots, because people complain about the Pats get all these calls and everything, but I think what most people don't know unless they watch NFL films is Belichick is constantly, he's got his hand on the challenge flag and he's in the refs' faces to the point where, you talk about breaking your opponents down mentally. He starts to break the refs down mentally, and they start second guessing themselves. And then, it's just part of how he works,
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many calls in that game, like the Clement touchdown where okay, he got both feet in, but did he have control when his left foot was down? And I still objectively looking at it, obviously I'm happy the call stood, but if I take away the teams based on how the NFL's called that all year, I don't know, if you
Yeah,
can really call it a catch or not. But the Ertz touchdown, I think people were upset, but I he took 4 steps,
yeah,
and then dove. So I don't see how you could. But again, that was another call that was close that they had to review, and you watch the NFL films, and there's nothing from Belichick. He's nowhere to be found. He's not his usual self.
mm-hmm.
So it was. I think that was probably the beginning of the end for the dynasty in terms of the infighting beginning. And of course they came back and won the Super Bowl the next year. But yeah, I think it was pretty clear that obviously Brady could retire today and his legacy is cemented. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the way I see it, he's earned the right to do whatever he wants with his career at this point. I know he's got a brand to sell. He wants to play until he's 45. So if he thinks Tampa Bay can offer him a better chance at success the next couple of years, then I don't blame him for doing that. But I can see where Patriots fans might feel a little bit upset, that there's not the loyalty if he's going to retire here in New England. Or I don't know, maybe he'll sign a 1-day contract like they do sometimes. But
I think it's also going to be a good transition for him to into retirement because he's already in Florida, so he can probably just settle down there. And he put his again another thing that I think a lot of Patriots fans we tried to block out is the fact that his house in Brookline has been on the market for probably the last 6 to 8 months. So it's like he's selling his house. I mean, I don't know what we were thinking. We're just trying not to think about it. But that was probably a pretty good indicator that he was looking to take off. And it is gonna be exciting to see someone new kind of leading the charge on the field. And I don't know who it's gonna be. I
Do you
don't know
think
if
it's
that's
going to be
gonna.
Stidham, or do you think they're going to go draft somebody or sign a free agent?
I I would imagine for this year it would probably be Stidham. That's gonna be my guess. I know that a lot of people are talking about, oh, they're going to draft Trevor Lawrence, or they're going to draft Trevor Lawrence. But I mean, Trevor Lawrence is going to be a first-round draft pick, and the Pats aren't going to have the first-round draft pick. So I don't think that that's going to be very likely. As much as I'd like to see that, as much as I'd like to see a Christian man be in a Boston, part of his Boston athletic affiliation, I think that would be great. But I think it'll be very unlikely.
So obviously the sports world is kind of at a standstill right now. There's been talk about uh, playing sports games without fans in attendance. I don't know if you've seen the whole MLB proposal, where they're talking about sending literally everybody to Arizona and like self quarantining themselves there, and then starting the season with every game in Arizona, and players and personnel will only travel from their hotels to the stadium and back, and they could do that for up to 4.5 months. It's this crazy idea. I don't see how it's going to work, but what do you think of playing games without any spectators?
I think it's honestly I don't have a problem with it. I know that it would be uh, very destructive as far as for the organizations because they don't have fans, but they don't really have any other option at this point. I think you know professional athletes, that's their job, and a lot of them want to do their job. They want to go to work, and they want to play baseball, they want to play football, they want to play hockey or basketball. Um, and I I would probably be a proponent of doing so. Again, I think that logistically it's a little kind of crazy. And like, how many guys are you allowed to bring with you? Um, what are the game times going to look like? Are they going to be using one field? Are they going to be using multiple fields? I'm just I think it's a very optimistic and positive idea, but like you said, I just don't think trying to pull that off would be uh, plausible.
Yeah, well, right when everything, like the week the NBA suspended, and that kind of started the fire with everybody the next day basically shutting down. NASCAR was in Atlanta. They announced that they were going to close the gates and run it without fans. And there's been some talk about if and when the curve flattens a little bit, things get a little bit better. Kind of coming back softly and not having spectators, just having the participants. But you think a sport like that, where you have 40 drivers and then 5 crew members plus a crew chief for each driver. I mean, that's 250 guys right there,
Mm.
and then all the mechanics and media and safety personnel and track officials and everybody that you would have to put on a race. If it's not safe for more than 10 people or more than 50 people or whatever the number is going to be, um, you can close the grandstands all you want, but for a lot of sports, I still feel like you're going to be well over those limits. So, and then if one person gets sick,
Then
yeah,
everyone's going to get sick.
yeah, it's a massive problem. So, I don't know what they're going to do, but we'll see. Like I said, hopefully it doesn't last too much longer, and we can get back. But I don't know. I've got a feeling it's still going to be at least a few months. But
Yeah, I think that that's kind of, at least from what I'm hearing, that kind of seems to be what the trend is going to be for the next couple of months. Maybe they'll do some sort of shortened season for the MLB, and maybe it'll continue into November, December, or something. I know
Yeah.
that'd be pretty difficult for places, like Colorado, to try to have games out there in November or December, um, or even here on the East Coast, or further up north in Minnesota and such. But yeah, I hope they can piece something together. Um, as far as obviously basketball, just we'll have to wait for the next season. Hockey, we'll just have to wait for next season. Um, I'm just really prayerful in the fact that I hope this doesn't reach into football season, because I
Yeah.
I really just wouldn't that wouldn't excite me if something had to happen to the football season, because it's already so short.
Yeah. Well, I've heard murmurs that some people are predicting the NBA, if and when they can come back this year, they would just jump right into the playoffs. Like take the standings
Mm.
as they are right now and just like have a maybe I don't know, maybe they do a best of 5 to save time or something, but going straight into the playoffs. And a couple players came out and said, look, if you do that, we haven't been able to practice as a team and be together. It's going to be the sloppiest gameplay, and players aren't going to be as good of a shape. So you might
Mm.
see, if you look back at the lockout season, just a few years ago, there was a massive increase in ACL injuries and
Oh,
another thing. Yeah, so
yeah.
that could pose a potential danger there, that you want to try to avoid. So we'll see what they do.
Yeah. Time will tell, I guess. Just got to be
Yeah,
patient.
yeah. So you co-hosted last year most of my podcasts, the photo finish for Scout Radio.
Obviously, you don't want races to cheat. You don't want anyone to cheat. And the interesting thing here, too, is that Harvick didn't get the money, he didn't get the points, but he's still jotted down in the record book as having won the race.
Something
I
I
can't wrap my
noticed of it
head
like
around that.
very soon after we met. Was scrolling through Instagram. I saw Haley Deegan she was just a NASCAR Next prospect at the time, but I saw you were following her. And so I asked you about that, and you told me you were a big fan of Brian Deegan and their whole family. So tell me if you've been if it's a motocross thing that you grew up with, or if it was, just you came across Brian's story somewhere and got intrigued by that. But how did your interest in motorsports begin?
It was actually because I had come across something involving just Brian's story, and he was at the time when I saw the video. He was no longer kind of touring with this organization, but there's an organization based out of Southern California called the Whosoever's Movement, and it's a Christian parachurch organization, and the guy that runs it is Ryan Rees, and he used to be a promoter for Monster, for a lot of different skate parks, different skateboarders, and um, just skate brands. And I don't know too much still about skateboarding and all that, but um, he was going around the country with musicians and athletes and celebrities and all these people who um, had an encounter with Christ and had been saved, and surrendered their lives to Christ. And Brian was one of them. So I remember watching one of the episodes, and I was like, oh, like, who is this guy? So I started looking and seeing, you know, kind of what he used to do. And I think I came across an article with all his family in it. And so I know, like, some of the younger brothers, or some of his younger sons, they don't have any social media, but I just followed all the Deegans that I could at the time. And, it was Brian and Haley. And that's kind of where my interest in them started. And then I met you. So, we kind of talked and conversed, and I was learning what, kind of what what NASCAR was, and what motorsports were. But initially, the kind of where my interest came from was just from hearing his story and his testimony.
So Haley's got started in NASCAR over the last couple of years. Is still at the ARCA level. Of course, ARCA and K&N kind of merged this offseason. How do you think she's done so far?
That's a really good question. I think, and we've talked about it a lot before. I think I'm happy with how she's done. I know with a lot of the mediazation and all these kind of the sensationalism is a lot, and I don't think that she's living up to almost what the media has hyped her up to be. Um, but again, like we,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, like we had talked about, she's just like turned 18, so she's still
Yeah.
young, and I think that a lot of this pressure is being put on her because she's a female, and or they're trying to promote that, which is great. I don't really care what gender a driver is, but at the same time, while I am a fan of hers and I do support her, I wish that there was uh, more fair media coverage on all the other racers too, because you kind of can't put your eggs in one basket, especially with NASCAR, because things can change so quickly. I think that there's a lot of good young racers, and from what we saw in Dover, and I mean anytime you tune into K&N, you can see that there's a lot of talented young racers, and I feel that if they just spread that media coverage out across all of them, it'd be really, really positive for motorsports. But it doesn't seem that they've caught on to that idea yet, so I'll just wait.
Yeah. Do you remember Daytona?
Yes.
So she finished the second, and then they say, oh, she tied the record for best ARC to finish by a woman, and here's Brian and Marissa's reaction, and oh, by the way, Michael Self won the race, but here's something so it was you come to expect it at this point. But actually, I just noticed yesterday, just looking at some analytics and numbers, she almost has, if we're looking at Instagram, she almost has more followers than Jeff Gordon and Kyle Busch combined.
Wow.
Which, there's 6 Cup championships between those two, and she hasn't even tested a truck yet. So just kind of,
I think
let that hit you. Like,
it is pretty incredible. I think
yeah, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That shows that she's pushed a brand and she's been very successful doing so. But it just, when you look at that and you see NBC still pushes her so hard, NASCAR, the Fox, all of them really still push her as hard as they are to get her name out there and hype her up. Cody Vanderwall's a guy that he's won 2 K&N races himself. He's just trying to nickel and dime his way to just even get to the track at this point in his career and, racing locally. But he's had K&N success, and he doesn't even have 1,000 followers. And she's got almost 700,000 now. Like, I think there needs to, if NBC and Fox and these media partners in the sport were more equal in who they gave airtime to, who they wrote stories on, I think it could be very beneficial. And, it frustrates me that we don't see more of that.
I agree. And I think that something else as far as going, into Haley's social media and all that, I know that things were kind of emerging, different opportunities for her, and she's involved with Under Armour, she's involved with Rockstar, she's got all these kind of different sponsorships, and she's doing a million different things.
You mean
and
Monster,
I remember,
right?
Or yeah, sorry, what did I say? Rockstar?
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's all right. Yeah.
Energy drinks. I just
direct competitors. But
yeah. But
and Ford now too, right? Because
and Ford
making the switch over, and Ford's totally picked up where Toyota left off and given her all the support.
That's right. So
yeah.
I mean, I think that a lot of this stuff is happening. I know that we talked about it. It was last semester, and it's kind of like, there's all this stuff going on, and she's kind of getting involved in all these different things, and I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. I think now, I think she's done a pretty good job as far as what her social media portrays. Obviously, again, she's a Christian. She comes from a Christian family, so the content is always is good. It's always wholesome. There's nothing ever inappropriate. But as far as her stuff with Under Armour, she does a lot of workout videos, and she does stuff with testing out whatever gear they have. So I wouldn't be surprised if one day she just stops racing and gets involved in doing something with modeling or working closer with Under Armour. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for her out there. But I wouldn't be surprised if eventually, um, we see her involved in something outside of racing.
Yeah, well, and she's got her dirt background too that she grew up on. So if this NASCAR thing doesn't work out, maybe she could go back to that as well. Aside from the Deegans, since you've taken up an interest in NASCAR since she's come over, you keep up with Cup at all or any of the other levels, any other racing? I mean, obviously a little bit because you know enough to co-host my show.
And over this last year, I haven't been following it as much as I honestly wish I should have been. Obviously, I'm a Ryan Newman fan, and I should have wore his hat today, but I picked that up at
Yeah.
when we were at Dover, and everything obviously involving him and the wreck.
Were you watching Daytona as it was happening, or?
I was not. I was actually, my roommate notified me, and he was like, "Do you know Ryan Newman?" I thought he was talking about someone on campus, and I was like, "No, like there's no Ryan Newman that goes here." He's like, "No, like the NASCAR driver." I was like, "Oh yeah." I was like, I was so confused why he said that. I didn't think he was talking about NASCAR. I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, because I know you like you're interested in NASCAR." I was like, "Well, what happened?" And so he told me and he showed me the footage, and I almost wish I just had come across it myself because here I have my roommate just telling me this and here, look at this. And, thank God he was able to recover so quickly and so effectively, because watching the wreck, I was blown away that he was able to, be removed from the car and was still alive, to be quite frank.
Yeah. Just the fact that he was able to walk out under his own power less than 48 hours after it happened is nothing short of miraculous. I don't understand. But it goes to show the safety of the cars today and how that's evolved. But I don't know. I'm hopeful and praying that the next time we go to Daytona or Talladega, because how they market the big wrecks and the entertainment factor as you get down to the closing laps, the wrecks get bigger and bigger. Like, I hope that they don't use that one in any of the.
Yeah.
I mean, I would wish that they would use very few of them, if any, and that you'd focus on the racing and close finishes and try to market that and use that to draw fans in. But yeah, very scary incident. So I thought of you because I know you bought his hat. You've been a fan of his for a long time. But yeah, just glad he's all right.
Yeah, I think something, what you're talking about as far as the coverage of the wrecks, it's something that has been, something in hockey. I've always been, a hockey fan, and they always market the big hits or the fights and stuff, and a lot of times that's what causes severe injury, and the game isn't about that. That's an aspect of it, but it's not the meat and potatoes of hockey. And I feel the same way when you talk about the crashes and how that's marketed as and sensationalized again as what the core of racing is. And
well, I think the rule changes the last decade or so have almost increased the chances that you're going to see that. I guess people you see these guys walk away from these violent accidents and you think they're invincible. So you want to up the entertainment factor, but just imagine you're trying to tell a casual fan or somebody who isn't a fan what happened, and you tell them that Ryan Newman's crash happened on the 209th lap of a 200 lap race. And and I know stick and ball sports have overtime, and it's the concepts, it's not completely nonsensical, but it's not something that the Indianapolis 500 is over after 500 miles.
Yes.
You look at the Daytona 500 the last few years, especially the leader at 500 miles sometimes isn't the winner, even though the race has 500. Like, they want to extend the race to give the fans a green flag finish, and I understand that. I get that. what IndyCar does sometimes is if there's a late accident, they'll red flag the race, even if track cleanup doesn't require it. They'll stop the cars and then try one attempt, so that you still end under the scheduled distance, but you get your attempt at a green flag finish, which even that, I feel like is, well, you wouldn't be throwing the red flag if it were normal circumstances. So even that's kind of gimmicky to me, but I'll take that in a heartbeat over,
Yeah.
We're going to have unlimited attempts at a green, white, checkered finish because these fans paid money and they deserve to see a green flag finish, even if we tear up 90% of the field in doing so. So
It's a dangerous game. It's a dangerous game to play, but no, I completely echo your input.
Yeah. And I don't know, like there was a lot of momentum this year, I think, obviously the rain delay at Daytona kind of robbed some of that for that particular weekend. But I think Trump being there drew in more casuals than it turned off liberal NASCAR fans. Maybe ones that were so liberal that, that just the mention of his name, you don't want anything to do with that. But, I think people were expecting them to lose half their audience. And I think when you look at maybe a Democrat who doesn't like Trump, maybe they don't like him, but they're not going to not watch the race just because he is at the race and giving the command and everything.
Exactly.
But long story short, point being, the ratings were up. And I think that drew some attention, got some momentum going. And I think we've seen some sponsorship deals come in for a lot of drivers recently, and ratings have been at least holding firm, if not up a little bit. So we'll see. I think this pause is going to harm some of the smaller teams that kind of live race to race. If they have to just shut down for a couple of months, you have to wonder if they're even going to be able to come back once things get going again. But we'll see. I don't know. Hopefully at the very least, I guess the chartered cup teams will be fine. But we'll see. I think there's some momentum in the sport right now in terms of interest, but even still, some of the teams might be hurting a little bit when we get back.
Yeah. The whole COVID-19 thing is I think a lot of times, we hear stuff and I'm thinking a lot about small business and stuff, but I hadn't even really drawn the connection to a lot of those smaller teams and what they're going to be missing out on as far as remaining financially stable. Again, I don't know, we've kind of seen NASCAR want to promote the bigger teams and keep them around. So I don't know what the response is going to be, but that's something I actually hadn't even really considered.
Yeah, well, you think of the NFL. The teams that are bad in the NFL that don't perform well, that finish at the bottom of the standings. They're there because of their talent in the roster or their coaching staff or whatever. But they're all owned by, wealthy individuals, wealthy shareholders, and the franchise as a whole. Like, you don't have to worry about the Cleveland Browns are so bad that you might not see them come back next year and a new team will take their place. But the motorsports is different. If a team finishes in the red, after a certain number of years, it's unsustainable. They have to pull out. Mm-hmm. So, and that's not just a NASCAR issue. That's going to be an issue all across the board because of how expensive the sport is. So keep your fingers crossed for those teams and be thinking about them, because there's some a lot of volunteers already, on shoestring budgets at those organizations. It just got 10 times harder for them to keep going. So we'll see what happens. So we got a little bit of time left here. I know you're a bit of a superhero fan yourself, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You co-hosted, what was it, Robert's The Comic Collision?
Yeah, it was Robert and Matt Lewis.
Yeah.
I think I had done I did do one episode with them. That's right.
Today's gonna be a little weird, but also kind of funny at the same time because my friend Matt isn't gonna be here tonight. So my other friend Matt decided to come join us. Say hello, Matt.
Hey, how you guys doing? We got the segue from Ben was correct. Even though it's a different Matt, he was still correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's on my YouTube channel, so I'll link it in the description here when we get that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tell me about your interest in Marvel, and I think specifically Spider-Man, right?
Yes.
You play the video game?
Oh yeah, I've played just about every single Spider-Man game since Spider-Man 3. So that was 2007 on the Nintendo DS. And so I'm aging myself a little bit there, but I think what my attraction to it came from the first Spider-Man movie that came out in 2002. And so I would have been 3 at the time, and I wasn't allowed to watch it. But when I was 4, my mom had like left the house to go run some errands or something, and my dad was like, "Oh, hey, let's put on the Spider-Man movie. That like it seems interesting." And we were 4 years old, and while I don't remember the experience itself, I just remember that my parents told me my brother and I became very intensely obsessed with Spider-Man, along with at the time, he had like Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and um, but I think with Spider-Man, the draw to it was his youth. So at the time when we're you know growing up as kids, 7, 8, 9, 10, his character's 15 or 16, but it was still like, wow, he's such like an old person. Like we can look up to him. But he wasn't too far gone where it didn't feel like we could make a realistic connection with him. But we had Spider-Man themed birthday parties. I can't tell you how many times I dressed up as Spider-Man for Halloween. Um, my parents' friends hired a guy who dressed as Spider-Man to come to one of our birthdays, and we had to he got himself trapped in one of our, I don't even know what we had in the backyard, like a jungle gym or something. We had to help him out. Oh, we were on cloud 9. But that's kind of where my interest in Spider-Man had come from, and I think that at least my favorite adaptation of him so far has been the Spider-Man PS4 game. And I mean, I don't know when the second one's going to come out, but it did tease that there should be a second installment, and even one now where you'll get to play as Miles Morales as Spider-Man, as opposed to in the PS4 game you play as Miles Morales just as himself. So that would be incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I actually just watched Into the Spider-Verse earlier this week for the first time.
Oh,
So I'm still trying to get caught up on everything, but yeah, I still need to see Andrew Garfield's movies. So once I get those 2 checked off, I know the second one is generally considered not great.
Yeah, I was a little lazily done, but the first one's actually pretty good. I enjoy the first one.
Yeah, who do you think, like movies aside, who do you think's done the best between Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland? Who do you think's done the best Spider-Man?
My personal favorite is Tobey, but I have to say that I think Tom Holland has been the best for Spider-Man. I think that he's opened a wider market as far as in bringing people into the Marvel universe and into superheroes in general. When Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were playing Spider-Man, while there were a lot of fans at the time, there really wasn't a draw for kind of the crowds that we're seeing, now. And I think that Tom Holland, honestly, I think he's done the best job as far as playing Spider-Man, bringing people to become interested in superheroes and become interested in Spider-Man in general. And I think that he most accurately fits the archetype of the Spider-Man that Stan Lee had created.
So what did you think this summer when the whole Sony Disney breakdown happened? What were you, team Sony? Were you team Disney? Were you mad at both of them and just wanted them to come to a deal? Were you maybe optimistic about where Sony could take Spider-Man by himself?
There was one rumor that was circulating at one point, and it was talking about there were going to be 2 different Spider-Men or something, that Sony was going to do one and that Marvel was going to do one. obviously Marvel bought back the rights to Spider-Man, or at least brought Tom
But
Holland
it's
back into the
yeah,
MCU.
shared now. They
Yes.
worked out a deal.
I think for me personally, I probably lean more towards Team Sony, but overall, I was just disappointed in the fact that these two organizations were more focused on financial gain as opposed to allowing fans to get what they want, and to further develop this character. I really didn't want to do another Spider-Man. We don't need 4 different Spider-Men in over 20-year period. I just don't think that that's effective. So I'm happy that eventually, it seems like they came to their senses and they realized. I mean, especially you got Sony, you got Marvel, and it's like neither of them are struggling financially. So why
Yeah.
make this big deal?
And the way I see it is, I think the deal was 95% Sony, 5% Marvel Disney, right?
Yes.
Plus Marvel gets all the merchandising and everything else it sells. So, on the surface, it doesn't sound like much, but, Far From Home makes $1.1 billion. So you take 5% of that, it's still, what, $55 million going to Disney? Like some movies, that's what they make total.
Yeah.
So you think of how popular the character is, how much revenue and money it brings in, and it still took them, they were at a stalemate for so long because they couldn't agree. And the way I saw it was just kind of like, you guys are both going to make so much money on it, and you're going to lose so much money if you don't come to a deal.
I know.
So I'm glad they were able to work it out. And just real quick as we close up here, I don't know if you've seen the trailer for Morbius.
I don't believe I have. No.
Okay. So Sony has Venom, and they're trying to create their own universe that is, I guess, kind of a cousin to the MCU.
Yes.
With Venom being the first film over there, and I know critics didn't like Venom. Audiences were kind of split on it. I don't hate it personally. I don't think it's the greatest movie ever by any means. But people didn't know where the MCU was going to go when you just had Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk. So we'll see what it turns out to be. But if you watch the Morbius trailer, you get the one trailer we've seen so far. There's a lot of origin story, and there's a picture on a wall of a Spider-Man in what looks like it's the PS4 suit, which is kind of interesting. And it's spray painted Murderer over it, which some people think is maybe referencing the Far From Home credits scene.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And people were, everybody loves to blame Sony for everything, right? So they were like, Sony can't even get the right, MCU suit, and some people were saying, well, that's not the finished product. They might have been doing that just to kind of tease it, and not make it super obvious. Because the super obvious thing came, you see the Morbius logo, and the final music's playing out, and then you have the last little bit of a trailer, and they pan out to Michael Keaton, and he says, "What's up, Doc?" And he's in the same white jail suit that he's wearing in the credit scene of Homecoming.
Wow.
So there was no official reference to Vulture or anything, but when people saw that, it's all but confirmed that there's been a crossover now, and it's not Marvel Studios produced. It's not technically MCU, but the Sony films are at least going to be able to reference the Spider-Man movies in the MCU.
Yeah.
So
Sony
and Marvel and Disney clearly worked something out to be able to put something together. So
I mean, and I think Sony did Into the Spider-Verse. So and this is kind of a little bit far-fetched, but my projection would be that the MCU keeps the Peter Parker Spider-Man, and maybe Sony introduces, Miguel O'Hara, so Spider-Man 2099, or follows Miles Morales, or follows Kane Parker, who is a clone that became the Scarlet Spider. And I think that would be something that fans would get really excited about, because we've all wanted to see a live action crossover from Spider-Man from different Spider-Verses. And so I wonder if Into the Spider-Verse was maybe a testing ground, and obviously easier through animation, and maybe Sony is going to instead put their focus on a different type of Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, I've heard rumors that Tom Holland might actually cameo in the second Venom movie.
I've heard that.
And that might lead into, in the Venom trilogy within Sony's universe, a final showdown between Tom Hardy's Venom and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I don't know if there's any truth to that or if that's the direction they want to go. But we'll see. I think there are a lot of characters and a lot of potential there if Sony and Disney are willing to work together and let each other do what they want to do. So we'll see. But again, everything comes back to this quarantine that we're in right now, because the theaters are closed. So Black Widow's been pushed back, and that's pushed back everything else in the MCU. So we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer. But I'm excited for the future here.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you for coming on this
Thank you for
afternoon, or
having
this
me.
evening rather. Yeah, I hope you're staying safe, and it was good to be able to catch up with you, and hope your classes are going well, and we'll hopefully get to talk again soon.
Yeah. And if nothing else, I'll see you on Tuesday night.
Yeah, that's true. Sports journalism. So that's you've been liking that class? I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I love Professor Lindsay. I had him last semester, and so wanted to take him again. It's tough because it's condensed, obviously condensed class, and it's remote learning. But I feel like there's so much that I've taken away just within the 2 weeks that we've met, and having Rob Bradford on was incredible.
Yeah, that was really nice last week to be able to have him. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you get off to dinner, and hope you have a good rest of your night. And yeah, I'll see you Tuesday.
All right. Sounds good, sir.
All right.
Thanks again, Ben.
Yeah, no problem.